Welcome to Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, specifically the no return mode. I played on the PS5 because, it's PS5. Now, why the no return mode? Well, because I've already reviewed The Last of Us Part 2 and I don't necessarily feel that I need to go over that again. I will include a link in the description below or up in the corner. So there is no story attached to the no return mode, it's just a new mode that they've added to the game, which I gotta admit is a little disappointing because I think you could turn it into some kind of story, not necessarily tied to the main characters, but in some way maybe even. Or you could at least provide some kind of information that would act as like a story-like inspiration, but they didn't. Then let's get into the audio, and the first thing I'm going to say is there's voiceover work, and there's not a ton of it, obviously, because there's not a story. But what is there, I think, is well done. Some of the stuff for the enemies is probably just reused assets. The stuff for the main characters, some of it might be new. It's kind of hard to tell, but whatever, at the end of the day, the voiceover work worked. As for the sound effects, I think the sound effects are really good. They are, once again, very helpful in a game like this because determining where enemies are, sneaking about, etc. And then last but not least, the music. I think, The Last of Us Part 2 had great music, and you hear the music here, and it's good. But let's get on to the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, because that's really kind of the core of what this is. And what this is a roguelike mode added to The Last of Us Part 2. You go on a run, there are a certain number of points along the run, essentially. You can, to an extent, choose branching paths, but it's kind of limited. You do one mission, you then branch off into two, and that each of those have a branch, but only two sets, and everything ties back into a boss fight. There are a bunch of different characters to play with, each of which has their own abilities. Some have advantages and disadvantages. Joel can deliver some massive beatings, but he can't dodge well. Tommy comes with his very own sniper rifle, and it's badass as hell, but he can't dodge in close up. Some characters are built around stealth. Dina is kind of awesome because she does traps, which I used a really dirty trick of killing dudes stealthily and then planting bombs on them. But I did like the variety that they added with the characters, and it was actually a character that I didn't think I was going to be particularly good with that I managed to actually do very well with, which is Yara. But I think hers is a little cheaty because she gets help from Lev just out the gate. It's always a partner mission. And the reason I point that out is because each of the stops along your little journey, they have their own rules. Some of them, you get a partner. When you're playing with Ellie and her team, you get a teammate from that side. If you're playing as one of Abby's allies or Abby, you get an ally from that side sometimes. Other times, you're rolling completely solo. But then each area kind of has its own thing. You've got the assault mode where you're going to have waves of enemies. But you can be sneaky. They may know where you are at the start, but if you move from there, they're not going to necessarily be able to track you. And they may not necessarily be hunting you. That's where the hunted mode comes in, where they are very actively hunting you and they know where you are from the start and they're not likely to give up. But there are other modes like capture mode and, what was the other one? There was like another horde mode type one. But there are different modes for each thing. You're not going to necessarily run into the same mode multiple times in a row, although you can, with the branching paths, you can kind of select modes that favor your character or your playstyle. But you're not always set like that. There was a time where I was straight into a hunted mode with Lev, who I find very easy to stealth about with, so I was deep shit from the start. But going beyond that, there can be modifiers for each area. Those modifiers could be that the enemies have more health, and if that's the case, if it's a modifier that's negative to you, well, you get more points at the end of the run. There's also modifiers like every time you get a melee kill, you gain health. Modifiers like that actually decrease your score. But then there are submissions like the drop boxes or the challenges. There are challenges to stun 3 enemies in a specific way or something like that. Or drop boxes are you have to deliver certain items. And that I felt was a little bullshit because there were times where I got drop boxes for items that I had no access to. I had multiple times where they're like, hey, drop off a Molotov. I had characters who couldn't craft Molotovs straight out the gate. I hadn't had an opportunity to buy Molotovs. So it was like, oh, so I just don't get this Dropbox. I don't even have the opportunity to attempt this Dropbox. Wasn't a fan of that. That annoyed me because the Dropboxes actually have some awesome rewards, like you might get a flamethrower next time you're in the hideout, or you'll get a new upgrade path, which let's go into that. While each character has their own playstyle, there are upgrade trees, essentially. Sometimes they're stealth, sometimes they're based around melee. What you get could be random. You may not necessarily get the same upgrade tree every time for a character. So it really does mix up every run. At the same time, it can make the different and unique characters who start with their own playstyle kind of start playing more similarly. So I feel like that could have been a bit better. But that's basically what you do, is you go on a mission, you do it, you go back to the hideout, you use any of the upgrade rewards that you've gotten, whether it's for your character upgrades, there's a little shop you can buy stuff from, or there's workbenches to upgrade your weapons. Then you pick your next mission and continue until you get through and fight the boss and beat the boss, hopefully. But let's move on to the controls. I have no complaints with the controls. They're the same controls that you get in The Last of Us Part 2. Which leads into the graphics and visuals. There's really nothing to add there. It's a beautiful game. It's been a beautiful game. It's going to continue to be a beautiful game. And I quite frankly don't think we needed like a PS5 remaster of this game, because the PS4 version still looked amazing. And while it's been a little while since I've played the PS4 version, I really didn't notice a huge difference. I don't think there was much of a leap, which is not me necessarily shitting on, the game. I just don't necessarily think that there was a need for a remaster, because it's a gorgeous game. It was a gorgeous game on the PS4. It's a gorgeous game now. And like I said, I just didn't really notice a difference. A one generation difference from one gorgeous game to another is not going to be huge unless it was like the first game released on a generation. So let's get into the wrap up. And I'm gonna say that while I did enjoy it, and if you already own The Last of Us Part 2, then you can just upgrade for $10 and it's almost worth it. It's kind of worth it. If you already owned it and you love being in that world and you want more of that gameplay, it can give you more of that gameplay. Is no return mode on its own a great selling point? Not really. Did $10 hurt me for it? Not really. Was it necessary? Nah. Not really. I mean, if you just absolutely need to replay this with the remaster, then nothing's gonna stop you from doing that. If you've never played The Last of Us Part 2, then picking up the remastered version, go for it, because you should play The Last of Us Part 2. But if you're just interested in no return mode, and you're just kind of curious, I gotta say, I wouldn't pay for it. I mean, I did, but that was mostly to review it. There's a very specific game that recently released their own roguelike mode, and I gotta say, that was way more just everything. It was just way better in every way. It was way more engaging. So for final thoughts on it, was no return mode this great addition to the whole thing? Okay, in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, was there ever a DLC or an add-on to a game where you just felt really meh to the whole thing? Like that it didn't add anything and wasn't really the best investment for the devs? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.